What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online. As usual, today I'm going to jump into this property on Mogul that's called the Prince. If you are not familiar with Mogul, I think I've talked about them quite a bit on this channel now. There is a playlist on my channel for Mogul specifically. I've looked at probably 3 or 4 properties on here, and then also just did like a general impressions and info about the site video. So you can check those out. This property is in Atlanta, Georgia. 7 bedrooms, 4 baths. It's set up as a pad split. If you're not familiar with that model, it's essentially rent by the room, and on a midterm basis, or sometimes it's usually weekly rentals, but in some markets they're required to do minimum 30 days, but then weekly after that. I think they change that based on what the rules are in individual markets, so they don't have to go and get a short-term rental permit. I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing here in San Antonio. If you've watched my channel before, I'm trying to pick up stuff in Georgia. It's a market I like. Um, Mogul just put this one up. It's under contract. It's not closed yet. They've raised, I don't know, it's almost 70,000, so like a fifth of the funds that they're looking for so far. Um, they don't have the analysis up for it yet. So that's one of the things. It's a little frightening to me that people are just throwing money into this before they even put their full analysis tab up. I guess you can do a lot of your own due diligence. You can figure a lot of stuff out on your own. And for some people, maybe they're not even doing that. They're just looking at what's the projection here. I like their other properties. Let me go ahead and buy some of this. Before I forget, please like and subscribe. I have links in the description below to Mogul and any of the other sites that I mentioned that I'm invested on. Mogul does give you 50 free bucks with your first, I think, $250 investment. Obviously, there's always terms and conditions, so you want to check the site out. Do your own due diligence on the site and the property. I haven't bought any of this one yet. I don't think that I will during this video. I think that I'm going to wait for their analysis tab to be up. But there's so much that I wanted to unpack with this one that I thought I would just break it up into 2 videos. I know sometimes I can get really long-winded with some of these property videos, and I think it would be better to have, go through this. And then actually I'm waiting for the analysis tab to come up, but I'm also hoping to get on the phone with somebody there. They have offered a few times in the past to, let you call and talk about their properties. I think that's because they're relatively new and probably don't have a ton of people taking them up on it yet, but I figured I should do that. So if you have questions that you'd like me to ask them when I do that, please put those in the description below or jump into our Discord. And you can see the link to the Discord again in the description of this video. All right, so let's jump right in. So why one I mentioned, it's in Atlanta. It's a market I really like. I've been, hoping to get something there and don't really have much of anything except for some notes at the moment. Well, you can see, it has had really strong growth over the last decade. Appears to be continuing with the most recent estimate. They had the early 2000s was slow for them, and I don't really know what happened there. But it's a market that just seems to have a really good strong growth story. Obviously, this isn't everything that you should do. I actually like to read the whole Wikipedia page. It's interesting. They have an excerpt of this is the one dot map. I think it's a map that takes census data and puts one dot, all over the place. It's one that, as a real estate agent, I don't ever share with clients because I think it opens you up to fair housing complaints, but this is the first time I've noticed it just sitting there on the Wikipedia page. They might give it more often. I just hadn't noticed it. But that is just census data that they've mapped. So yeah, I like this market a lot. It is fast growing. It's also the market where Padsplit started, I believe. I know I've got a client that owns um, multiple properties in Atlanta that are run as pad splits. And so it's a bit more of a proven model there. I think part of the reason for that is they've had because they have grown really fast, they've had a very, let's see, so you can see, their price run up in homes was very strong. You can see it's definitely come down a little bit, and it sort of has this same shape as a lot of the markets that I've mentioned, similar to San Antonio, where if there's still a lot of builder activity, at least here our median is being driven down in large part due to a lot of smaller homes being built and put on the market. I don't know that's necessarily what's happening here, but I've seen this same shape in a lot of markets where there is still a lot of new construction. So that's my guess of what's happening. I mean, it is just in general, there's been softness in the market, so that could be it as well. But you can see like it was just a massive run up going into that 2022 time frame is where things sort of where interest rates went up and we sort of started seeing this. But because of that, because affordability, obviously when you have a market that grows 18% in 10 years, they just can't build enough homes for that. And so rents went up, home prices went up. And that forces, that's where this rent by the room model, where it becomes more popular when affordability gets bad. Um, People rent a room instead of a whole apartment or a whole house. Uh, and so that's what this is catering to. It's you basically you just pay a flat weekly fee and you don't pay any utilities. It covers your Wi-Fi, it covers your electricity and your really your water, everything that's required. I don't even think that they make them get renters insurance, but I'm not positive about that. They might automatically do that through the system. That's something I should ask about because I don't know. Um, so let's look at the property a little bit. So a couple of things. It looks like they're paying the asking price, right? And we saw this with the last one that they bought too. Um, Part of the reason is it's a turnkey pad split, right? It's up and running. It's been running since February of last year, so just about a whole year. So they can see how it's performing. One of the things though that is really hard to figure out is they said in December they had $9,000 in gross revenue. Uh, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but this is I actually found the home on Padsplit. It's locked at the moment because it's completely full, but they're saying from 245 to 295 weekly. And so okay, let's say all 7 bedrooms are rented. So 7 times 295 and then times 4.3 weeks. That wouldn't quite get you to the $9,000, and they said over $9,000 in gross revenue. So what I think is happening is December must have been a month where they collected, they don't do it actually as 4.3, but they do it like when the rents actually hit. So if you had, 295 times 7 times 5, right? If there was, because there's going to be 2 months every year where you have a fifth charge, and then that gets you to 10,000. So maybe that's what's happening. I don't know, but it did strike me a little odd because this is saying from 245 to 295. And if you just do it by 4.3 weeks, which is what's really in a month roughly, and you pick the top of their range, you don't get to that 9,000. So made me worried a little bit. I did find this property though on LoopNet as well, and they've got it listed as their pro forma gross rental income is 100,000. Let's look at what Padsplit was actually doing here. Oh well, we don't have our analysis tab, um, so I can't tell you what that is yet, right? I don't think we have the gross rent, so I don't know. We'll jump into the numbers on the next. So I will do a second video after the question, so that we'll jump into those numbers there. Let me talk to you about the things that we can actually talk about. The inspection. There's just quite a few problems with this home. It is, you know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the roads, which is doing perfectly fine. But it is, it's an 88-year-old house. I don't know, but so that was one where they called it a turnkey investment, and it's turnkey in the sense that it's up and running and there's guests. But there were just a lot of issues on that one too, just like this one, where none of them are catastrophic, none of them are terrifying to me, but there's a couple that I want to point out. One of the things that I'd really like to see Mogul start to do, because they're doing this, during the purchase phase, and they do show us, um, I've already got it here, right? They have a large reserve. So about $50,000 of this is for the R&M reserve, and the other half would be, their vacancy reserve. I think that this is, there's a good chunk of money. My guess is they're going to take care of some of these things. It would be great if they actually outline that, somewhere in the description, like what they're fixing and what they're not. So some of the bigger things, and there's a lot of little things that you just expect, a lot of stuff like this. Oh, it's an older home, right? You've got, now still any place where you have some water infiltration possibilities, you'd want to fix it. Um, you can actually see some of the wood. It looks like it's gotten, some rot. Yeah, this one's really bad, right in this window here, and this, the framing. Now, it really could just be cosmetic in the exterior, but sometimes when you've got frame rot like this, you also have water getting inside the wall and rotting, right? So, like, it'd be great if they addressed this, if they talked a little bit about, like, yes, we did a little bit further, or this is something we're planning to repair, and this is part of what we have the reserve for. Hopefully, they're not just going to buy this, put it straight into service, and not address some of the things that could lead to bigger problems down the road. You have some drainage issues in the yard where it's sloped towards the house instead of away. I actually give you a little diagram here. I've sold a whole bunch of homes and invested in some myself that have had this issue up front, and it's it is something that you have to address. Sometimes you can address it with by actually, the grading, but a lot of times you might do a French drain, or there's just different ways to deal with it. It's something that I'd like them, to just say, hey, this is what we're going to do here, because obviously, you are getting some drainage issues in the yard, which can lead to foundation issues. And they do point out this one spot where there's, a crack by one of the piers. Um, and they're like, oh, just, fix that crack and monitor it. And probably a house this old, unless you're seeing a lot of movement, yeah, that's probably the right answer that a lot of foundation contractors are going to, give you. But it'd be nice for them to say, yes, we contacted one, this is what they're doing, or, this is why we think it's not a big deal, right? I mean, I think that's the sort of info that I'd love to see. Once they give us this list of problems, I want to know which ones are going to be fixed and which ones aren't. There's mentioned, okay, a lot of problems with the deck. Well, excuse me, I've got 7 guests living in this home. I want to know that this deck is actually, safe for them. Um, some rotten wood, like all that stuff. None of it is the stuff that would stop me from buying a property as long as I had properly budgeted for it, right? And that this anything that like indicated that maybe there's hidden problems, I'd want to dig into that a little more. And then the AC, it is caged. We do this in some parts of town here in San Antonio. Usually this happens in places where there's a little bit of a problem with the condensers getting stolen. And so, this it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's one thing that I take as a signal often, to look for other signs that we're maybe in an area where we have to worry about, stuff getting stolen from the property. But it is, they mention it's older. That's, 2012. That's the interior one. They said they couldn't get an age off the exterior one. It does look older when you look at it. Usually you can get a date off of this thing, but maybe maybe it's covered by this, or maybe sometimes these tags don't actually have it either. But that's, I think definitely would expect to replace these over the holding period. Um, and where we pay the utilities on these pad splits, because we're covering all of that expense. You want stuff like this to be running in tip-top shape to keep those prices down. You've got your. I don't even know that they mentioned anything about the sagging insulation and whether or not there's enough. Like you can see this little piece falling down here. You do want to make sure that it's insulated well. Maybe they did get into it in the discussion. I'm not sure. Um, yeah, one of the vents was disconnected. Obviously, you want to get that fixed. But so, a lot of stuff that to me is expected in a property this age, but isn't necessarily when I think of turnkey, isn't what I think of. And, I think that that's kind of how this is described. But I mean, I know they're buying it as a on, a going concern. It's a property that's operating and they're buying that operation. And so, I think that that's perfectly fine to call it that, but it's just not what I expect when I hear that term. Normally, there's these companies that refer to themselves as turnkey operators. They buy a property, they renovate it, they put a tenant in it, and then they sell it with management in place. And so that's the sort of concept I normally have in mind. Now this was bought just I think in 2023, so it's sort of what they're doing here, right? They bought it. There was clearly some renovation. They got it filled up. They ran it for a while, but their renovation was just not as complete as I'd like to see. And really, just this, the big things are, um, obviously the HVAC. You want to have that really working well. A lot of times, people will just keep repairing it, but once it gets older, at a certain point, it does just save you money to have one that's working well. The drainage and the water damage to some of the wood, like those sorts of things, you just want to make sure. I never want water actually getting in my home, right? And so you want to just, I just want to know how are addressing those really. Those are the only main ones I think. But I mean, there was nothing that I recall that really jumped out that I was like, oh, that would make this a no go for me. Of course, you want to look at all this stuff yourself. Do your own due diligence. I do really like that they give us these, um, full inspections, so you can get quite a bit of info on this, just like you would, if you were buying the property yourself. I did. Well, let's go here. I looked at the flood map just like always. It looked fine to me. Um, again, you want to just look at it, make sure you feel good about it. Pulled up the FEMA National Risk Index. And I'm using the expected annual loss tab, and it's relatively moderate. It's like, okay, well, what I like to do is just go through and see what are our actual risks. Um, you know, Hail relatively high, okay. Hurricane relatively high. Ice storms, landslides. I was actually surprised at the earthquakes, score relatively moderate. I would have thought that would have been low, but obviously I don't know. Lightning, riverine flooding, strong winds, tornadoes. I mean, none of these things came as a big surprise, and it's sort of what I expected. Relatively moderate. You'll see like when you look at neighboring counties. One of the things that when you look at expected loss, the more dense the area is, you're going to have darker areas. And so that's why I like to look at the info over here to get a better sense of what how often there's issues. And I think that can help. That's how I like to think about what could actually happen to my property. Um, let's see, let's close. Oh, so one of the things I did, when I was looking into, I showed you the pad split numbers for that property, and it's okay. It's rented between 245 and 295 per week. Um, Really hard to duplicate their numbers, so I really want, hopefully when we see the analysis tab, they show us what their average top line is, and I'm curious if it is actually above that 9,000 a month or not. If it is, I don't know. They have to explain that because I'm not sure what it is. But one of the things that I noticed is there's a really big range in what pad split is. So I'm on padsplit.com. There's a really big range in what they're charging. There's some that are as low as 135, 153 a month, and then 278 over here. I'm sure part of it is, the part of town, and I'm not that familiar with Georgia or Atlanta to be able to tell you, oh, well, this is what's going on in this neighborhood. That's one of the things. If I was going to put a bunch of money into this, I'd probably spend some time digging into each one of these. I looked at them a little bit. I feel one thing, it makes me feel really good to see that Padsplit confirms that it's full when I look at it on here, right? They're not telling us it's full, but they're trying to rent 3 rooms. That's one of the big things. And you can see when you zoom out, like Padsplit has a ton of offerings in Atlanta. When you compare that to where I am, we hardly have any. And so that, but it is because I think this is where they started. Um, Surprisingly, when I look at Furnish Finder in the same area, I see almost nothing. They have some, but so like Padsplit's definitely dominating the rent by the room. Um, most of these are actually private studios and whatnot. So I did find, an individual room at $1,000 a month that was furnished, and so this was the only one on this site that helped me confirm, that the 250 a week is definitely reasonable. But looking at these, anywhere from, where they've already rented through here, 245 to 295, made me feel pretty good. There wasn't any that are higher than ours that I saw. And so, it seems like as far as the pad splits go in this area, we're providing, I guess, a premium product, right? And so let's take a look at the pictures. Um, it does seem pretty spacious compared to some of the pad splits that I've seen. There is a good amount of, a lot of times they're cutting up any additional space to add extra bedrooms. But, they do have a decent sized dining area. They have a full size kitchen. Um, and that's, I think, an additional, is that? Oh, that's the kitchen off to there, and that's that table. So we're seeing it again. And so, and it has relatively, or, pretty nice finishes compared to other pad split properties that I've seen. A lot of times they're just really low end, not, you won't even have granite countertops. You won't have, it won't be tiled. You'll have like linoleum or, sometimes they are very much just the cheapest type of workforce housing they can be. But this is actually, it's a pretty nice place. So it makes sense to me, having looked at this and looked at some of the other listings, that they are getting a premium. And I think it's probably a good sign, where they're full and they were able to get full in their first year. Because one of the things that happens is, you have 7 empty rooms, you've got to fill them up, and then sometimes you get turnover quicker, earlier than before you even get them all full. And so sometimes that first year as a pad split can be tough. I haven't actually owned one myself, but I have clients that do this, and I've spent a lot of time digging into it. And so that's, I mean, that's, secondhand information, but that's one of the things I have heard multiple times from investors, that, to get to that full point in your first year, obviously it's the goal, but sometimes with turnover, it's tough for it to be that way. It'll be interesting to see if it stays that way through the escrow period or if we lose anybody. But I do think when you have a little bit more of the nicer end of the product, that they probably, a lot of times, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? They're not cheap at all relative to the 150 a week ones that we saw. But it's people, if they chose the more expensive one, and it's nicer, they might stay there longer, right? That's at least my thought process on that. So let's see. I just want to close these tabs because my computer's acting a little bit funny. Oh, well, I already did that one. Close the pad split tab. Yeah, I jumped into looking for values of the property. So I was on homes.com. One of the things, a lot of the sites like Zillow and whatnot, they won't give you his estimate when it's listed. Or, sometimes they will and they'll bury it. They actually do it a little bit different in each market, I found. But I didn't see his estimate for, oh, actually, no, they do have one here. Okay, so they've got his estimate just 5,000 under. Yeah, maybe I miss it that often, but I really believe in some markets they won't give it to you when it's listed. But that makes me wonder if I'm just completely wrong about that, which I certainly could be. Um, well, maybe I'm thinking about Realtor. I don't know. But home. So that's good, right? I mean, that gives us, we're within 5,000 on there. Um, This is one thing that on the homes.com one though that I thought was pretty interesting. So let's see, you get all the way down. They give you a bunch of different home value estimates, and so you have quite a big range. But then they give you the average value of those four, and it's 684. So okay, we're paying a little bit more for that. But remember, we are getting it furnished and full of tenants. So I think there's some value there. But this is interesting, right? It's a more expensive house on average than homes in the area, right? It's 700,000 versus 520. But because it's such a large home, our value or average price per square foot, or the value, it compared to the average, is much lower. And so I think that that's a pretty decent sign. I like that. I like that aspect of it. I think there's a lot to like about this property. I want to show you a couple of things, other than the inspection, which I already did. A couple of things that worried me a little bit about the area, though. So, or the way it's situated, and so one of the big things um, that some of the more experienced pad split operators that I've talked to really harp on is what's my parking like, right? And so sometimes the people that rent these are going to be really bus focused, right? They're not going to own a car. And so let's zoom out and see. I didn't actually notice a bus stop. I wonder if they use different indicators for buses than what we have here in town. Because that's one of the things that are, oh, okay, I saw one right there. So that's not too far. Oh, okay. Actually, we have them. Oh, right there. Okay. Actually, so that's good, right? We've got a bus stop really close. Okay, so that's fantastic. I missed that when I was looking at this earlier. Man, I'm missing all kinds of stuff tonight. So that's actually a really good sign. Maybe, because like I said, a lot of the people that use pad splits, they're not driving; they're using buses. But I still want to see. Oh, I still want to see plenty of parking. What did I do here? Let me back up and let me get away from. Okay, there we go. And when we look at the parking situation here, um, when we're talking about seven adults living in this home, you could certainly fit four or five cars in here because it's a pretty long driveway. There is another picture where there's a vehicle here or here. So maybe four, like one, two, three, four tandem and next to each other. But you really don't want to do tandem parking when you have um, people living together in this type of model. One of the things that I'm curious about, if these pads are usable by them or if they're just for this business. I think they're just for the business that's next door, but it is something, it's one of the questions I'd really want to know about this because, okay, we only have these spots and there's absolutely no street parking here. So you're either only, you're relying on at least half of your guests just not having a car. I have talked to the people at PadSplit, and I think that is um, that's probably somewhat normal. But if you get four people in here with a car, or even four, I think you're going to start to have problems with people parking behind each other. So that's one of the questions I'm going to ask is like, is there any additional parking? Can this space on the side be used, or does this belong? I mean, just because of the way the driveway set up, I think this just belongs to this business. And then one thing that I did notice, there's quite a bit of this in the area, quite a bit of graffiti. You can see it all over here. Um, you know, honestly, with the pad split model, where you are providing some of the cheapest housing in the area, a lot of times you're going to see that, but it is, it's just something that I'm always keeping in mind, right? Oh, I didn't pull up the spot crime map for this yet. Why didn't I do that? There's just there just was a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to talk about with it. I think I'll save the spot crime map for when I do the second part of this, when we jump into the numbers and hopefully get some questions answered too. So yeah, as a reminder, if you're still watching this, please post your comments either in this, in the description below, or jump into the Discord and ask them with any questions that you have about this property. Because like I said, I'm going to try to get them on the phone, see if I can get some questions answered about it. Um, and then obviously once the analysis tab is up, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into the numbers. I did find a LoopNet listing for it. I think I mentioned this already. Um, yeah, I did with the pro forma number. They're showing it as a 9.72 cap rate. If you trust those numbers, that's fantastic. I am really interested to see how that compares to what we end up having once they have their analysis tab up. But in general, I've found when they're buying these operating properties, they seem to be getting ones where like the roads did pay out exactly what they said it was. The axle rod has for me for a couple months now. So at least I'm starting to get a little bit of history. As a reminder, I'm very new in investing on Mogul, and really all these sites, right, that I'm talking about. I'm just trying to share what the due diligence that I'm doing and the thought process, not necessarily endorsing any of these platforms whatsoever. I mean, I think, yeah, the Axelrod I have with them, that's one of the properties I've gotten paid for 2.5 months so far, right? So it's not as if I have, a long-standing relationship and can really tell you that they're great or anything. Although when I compare the properties that they're picking out to just about any other platform, I do really start to like Mogul quite a bit because of that. Now we'll see. We'll see what the analysis looks like on this one. I'm not sure. I like the pad split model. I like that it's in Atlanta. Um, I'd really like to know, which problems that are going on are going to be fixed. Really want to dig into their numbers a little bit more. Understand what the parking situation's like. But beyond that, I'm curious, what other questions people have. So please, like I said, put those in the comments below. I might have said description before. I don't know what's going on. Making all kinds of just dumb statements. Sorry about that. Um, just want to think real quick and see if there was anything else I wanted to tell you about this. But I think that's really everything. Um, I don't know. I think it's promising. I want to get answers to those questions. I want to. Oh yeah, these are. This is not too far down the road, right? So there is. That's one of the things that they're really touting is that it's walkable, both for places to get coffee and eat, but also a lot of times for people staying in these properties. These are the types of jobs that they're going to work at too. A lot of them are going to work retail. A lot of them are going to have, that's a lot. Pad splits model is it's sort of workforce housing, right? And so, being able to walk to some place where they might be working is a huge selling point. And so, I do like that about this. Um, on the flip side, if they ever go to sell this home, when we look at the appreciation and the value of the home going forward, um, looking at this as not a pad split, this is not the type of home, that would sell really quickly. Like, um, one, I mean, it's a very large home to be on a street of this size, right? Like a lot of people, a lot of people with kids, they don't want to own a home on a somewhat busy street where there's no buffer between. There's no street parking, so it's just like, okay, you're back right out into the road. I don't know. So this is one that on the appreciation side, um, I think in the future you're going to sell it as a pad split as well. It's the next buyer will probably be another investor, and that's something to think about from that perspective. But in general, I think if we can get the parking question answered and really understand, why, if they're not worried about that, why, I do think this area seems like a fairly decent area for this model. Based on, okay, you do have a bus stop right next to it, which I was missing at first. You do have a lot of little employers that somebody could walk to. They could work at the coffee shop or this place, or all of those things are, and also too, you might attract um, tenants that already work here, right, in the same way. It's not as if, they're going to move here and then get a job there. It's sort of what I'd expect it to be the opposite way, right? They work there and they're looking for a place nearby, and oh, that's fantastic. I can walk to work. That's sort of the stuff, when I have talked to the people at Pad Split, that they really like to see that. They like to see the bus stop, but then really a lot of times have harped on the parking, and so that's why I want to figure that out. I think that's everything for today. Um, like I said, we'll dig into this a little bit more once they get their analysis tab up, and let me know what other questions you have. Until next time, like I did today, lots of mistakes. I'm going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.